I am a big fan of both Sega's 32X and Atari's Jaguar. While they don't initially seem similar, both represent the awkward transition into three-dimensional gaming. Both were met with high expectations, and both ended up being miserable failures. Both systems utilized an aging medium, cartridges, and both made poor attempts to embrace CD technology. The Jaguar had an add-on, and the 32X was an add-on. Both machines were discontinued in 1996 after the proper next-gen machines captured gamers' hearts. In today's face-off, we will take a look at and compare 5 games from each system's library to determine obscurity, superiority. You cannot do a comparison of the Jaguar and 32X without looking at Virtual Racing Deluxe and Checkered Flag. Checkered Flag is such an obvious rip-off of Virtual Racing in nearly every way. Both games feature open-wheel racing and flat-shaded polygonal graphics. Both games were released in November of 1994. Coincidence? I think not. This comparison is particularly interesting because it summarizes the cards each company had to play. Sega had talented programmers like Yu Suzuki and his AM2 team at its disposal, the kind of talent that could squeeze power out of a system like the 32X. Atari did not. Instead, they were pinching pennies and shelling out projects to the lowest bidder, which often meant inexperienced development teams ill-equipped to handle the challenging architecture of the Atari Jaguar. Virtual Racing features a smooth frame rate and relatively detailed levels, despite the lack of texture mapping. Checkered Flag looks similar, especially in screenshots, but it is once you see the game in motion that Virtual Racing trumps Checkered Flag in every way. Checkered Flag is a dog. The frame rate chugs along somewhere below 10 frames per second. The tracks are all flat and don't have the same complex geometry as the Virtual Racing tracks. Virtual Racing shows off the 3D prowess of those twin Super H2s. Oh yeah, Virtual Racing Deluxe is fun. Checkered Flag is painful. Score 1 for the Sega. I loved Super Mario Kart growing up. For years, it was the benchmark of what fun racing games should be. It was often imitated, but few games could hold a candle to the original. So it is no surprise both the Jaguar and the 32X each got a Mascot Racer. BC Racers comes to us from Core, a company who consistently pumped out quality titles. Core was known for squeezing every last ounce of performance out of Sega's other add-on, the Sega CD. Atari Karts comes from Miracle Designs, and this would be their freshman effort. So who will win out? The upstart from Belgium or the Brits from Core? Atari Karts is a gorgeous game, featuring full-screen graphics, a fast frame rate, and excellent sprite scaling effects. It really shows off the 2D capabilities of its respective machine, and it makes Mario Kart look dated and old. BC Racers runs in a bordered window and can hardly keep up with itself. Graphically, BC Racers has more roadside objects and may even look better in screenshots, but Atari Karts moves along at 60 frames per second, while BC Racers looks like a slideshow. Picking the winner of these two is a no-brainer. BC Racers is half-finished. Atari Karts is extremely polished. The problem with BC Racers do not stop at the graphics. The controls feel more like a suggestion for your kart rather than an input. Atari Karts is damn near perfect and superior to the plumber's efforts. Atari Karts looks and feels more like a next-gen game than BC Racers. Atari Karts looks effortless while BC Racers looks like it's choking the 32X. Point goes to the Jag.
Welcome to the family. Get ready.
Back in the 1980s, Sega created a line of superscaler games, arcade games with special processors made for scaling sprites to simulate 3D environments. Classic titles like Hang On and Space Harrier ushered in exciting new graphics that did a respectable job creating a 3D world by smoothly scaling sprites as they got closer to the screen. The Sega 32X and Atari Jaguar had enough processing power to finally toss around large amounts of scaled sprites. Sega chose to flex its muscles with a port of Afterburner. Atari has an original title, Super Burnout, which was inspired by the classic Hang On. Your preference in title will likely depend on whether you prefer racing games or arcade shooters. and both titles are excellent, but alas, we must choose a winner. The comparison really shows off the raw power of the Atari Jaguar when programmed properly. Instead of utilizing the Motorola 68000, the 16-bit processor also used in the Sega Genesis. Shen Technologies programmed all of the code on the Tom and Jerry 32 and 64-bit silicon. The title screen music, for example, features music with a higher sample rate than a compact disc, no lie. The developers also managed to throw more than 1,000 sprites on screen at once, 3 times more than what is possible on the Neo Geo. Do the math. Super Burnout's frame rate is silky smooth, never wavering from a solid 60 frames per second. Afterburner is also excellent and a near perfect arcade port, but it runs at 30 frames per second due to presumably RAM and bandwidth limitations. The Atari Jaguar gets another point. Supercross 3D for the Atari Jaguar and Motocross Championship for the Sega 32X are two very different games, accomplishing the same task in very different ways. Both games are often panned, but I enjoy both nonetheless. Motocross Championship uses a strange 2D graphics engine. It gives a convincing sense of height as you climb up and down the track. The opponent sprites also scale as well, giving a sense of depth. Overall, it moves beyond what the 16-bit systems were capable of, but is not mind-blowing by any stretch. Supercross 3D goes with a full 3D engine powering the tracks. There is a nice blend of textures defining the course and flat-shaded polygons for the non-course areas. There is even a large real-time jumbotron in the background, quite the technical feat. The riders themselves are scaled sprites and of the high-res variety. Also interesting is the sound in both games, which is terrible. Both racers feature one looping track of generic synthesized rock and average at best sound effects. Strange. So, which game wins? Which game loses would be more appropriate. Supercross 3D has a terrible frame rate, making the game unplayable to most. It also has some wonky physics, which send you off course and then immediately crash. Supercross 3D was released at the end of the Jaguar's lifespan, and in many ways sums up the Atari Jaguar. It was clearly rushed and not finished, and disappointing. Motocross Championship is not a stellar title by any stretch of the word, but it is a lot less broken. The frame rate is solid, as are the controls, and overall, there is more enjoyment to be found. Another point for the Sega 32X. The score is tied at 2 apiece, and we're down to our final face-off, so which of these two acclaimed platformers will take home the prize? Atari never had a mascot, and Sega never graced the 32X with a Sonic title. Therefore, both ended up receiving second-tier Mascot Platformers. The Sega 32X got Knuckles Chaotix, while the Atari Jaguar got Rayman. Interestingly enough, both characters still live on, 20 years later. Up first is Knuckles Chaotix. What started as a sequel to Sonic and Knuckles ended up as a Sonicless platformer, for reasons no one may ever truly know. While graphically pleasing, Knuckles Chaotix from a technical standpoint rarely looks like more than a souped-up Genesis game. Where it does show some pizzazz is in the hexagonal bonus stages. With a nod to Sonic 2's half-pipe bonus stage, Knuckles Chaotix features a smooth 360-degree hexagonal pipe, bending and twisting through space. The flat-shaded polygons are big and chunky, but the frame rate is smooth and it is fun. Rayman, on the other hand, truly looks like a next-gen title. The graphics, particularly in the earlier stages, are gorgeous, dripping with animation and color. Rayman himself is well animated. There are no gimmicks here, just well-drawn, jaw-dropping 2D graphics. While Knuckles Chaotix has an amazing soundtrack, 2-player support, and some polygon pizzazz, the level design is pretty sparse, with few challenging moments and even fewer enemies, so my nod goes to Rayman. The game still feels fresh and has aged very well. Controlling Rayman is a breeze, the chiptunes are catchy, and the level structure is far more satisfying. The match point goes to the Jaguar. So there we have it. In a direct matchup of 5 popular genres from the 90s, the Jaguar comes out ahead. But don't take these results too seriously. We could have easily swapped in some Virtua Fighter and flipped the results. Instead, take this as a playful comparison from 2 incredibly underappreciated machines.